Okay, so first step in making the tempeh is I start out with 2.5 cups, and this makes, if you make this, it makes kind of like 2 packages of tempeh. So we'll start out with 1, 2.5, and then I just run some cold water, and I just and you see the water is very cloudy, and I just pour off the water, and I just do a couple of quick rinses to take all the dust off the soybean. I mean, this step takes about 1.5 minutes overall. Whenever I stop making tempeh, or whenever I finish a batch or move a batch out of the bowl, I just start another batch because it freezes well. It's like having your protein in the freezer. Kind of freezes like at least a good year. Now you see the water is just a little bit cloudy now. I'm using a couple of beans. And I'll maybe do one more. And you see it's almost clear now, just like very slightly cloudy. Let's pour it all out. And then you just fill it up. They're gonna about double in size. So I just let it maybe go 3 or 4 inches over the top of the bowl. Remember, 2.5 cups of soybean, dry soybean. Rinse a couple of times to get rid of the cloudiness and dust. And then just fill it up a couple of inches over the top. Nice cold water. And we'll come back tomorrow morning and see what that looks like. All right. Kind of like the next step in making tempeh, I have soaked 2.5 cups of dried soybeans, soaked and cleaned them, rinsed them, and then put them in water to cover. And you see they've about doubled in size. And that's about what they're going to do, is about double. So the next morning, I take out a potato masher. You can also use your hands, doesn't matter. And I just kind of mash them for about a minute. You can do this all at once, like you can spend 10 minutes and just do the whole thing. But I just tend to do something, then leave it for a while, and go and do something else, and then leave it for a while. I'll show you I'll show you how I do it, and I'll just, of course, leave the time in between so you can see what it looks like. So, while you're mashing the hulls, these things, to get off the beans. So the other way to do that is also you can get your hands in there. So the first time I do it in the morning, clean hands, of course, but you see all the hulls coming off? You want to kind of split the beans and take the hulls off. And I just kind of do this, and like maybe do it for 2 minutes or so. It's not a big time investment. I do it every morning that I make tempeh. There we go. And you can kind of see the hulls are floating to the top. So I'm going to pour these off. You can see the hulls coming off. There's quite a bunch of them. If you pour slowly, you won't get too many beans coming out. And then that's the first one I do. I'll do it a couple more times during the day. So over the next time I pass by the kitchen sink. So now I'm just topping it up with water. And what's going to happen is these holes all float to the top. Look at how many are coming off. See? It's just all, get your hands in there. It's like kneading bread dough. Kind of zen. There's all kinds of them coming off. So I'm just going to leave that until the next time I pass by here. And when I pass by here, I'll show you how many hulls are floating at the top. I'll pour it off and I'll do it again. Okay, this is the left it and come back a couple of times, the soybeans, and you can see that whole bunch of the hulls are floating on the top. So I'm going to pour off this batch. I've done this maybe 4 or 5 times. You don't need to do it a lot. And you see all the hulls are kind of disappearing. I'll do it one more time here, just to make sure that any hulls that were at the bottom kind of float to the top. Every time you do this, it maybe takes 30 seconds. It doesn't take long. And then I'll pour off the hulls. There's a whole bunch more still came. And then this is the point when I will put this, I'll rinse this with fresh water, put it in a pot that leaves enough space at the top, a good 3-4 inches at the top. And then we'll move on to the next step, which will be cooking the soybeans. All right, this is the next step in making the tempeh. So I've done a couple of rinsings and I've removed all the hulls, or pretty much most of them. So I do a final draining of what's in there and put it into a pot. Fill it with fresh water. And I like to fill it about 2 inches above the soybeans, or 1.5 inches, because then what's going to happen is when this cooks, all the hulls, the rest of the hulls will come to the surface, and they're super easy to scoop off. So I will just quickly you just put a little blob of vinegar, about a tablespoon, and then I'll move this over to the stove. I bring it to a boil. This is going to come to a boil really fast. So as the soybeans come to a boil, you'll see this white foam on the top, and you want to kind of watch it until you get most of this off. But what's also in that white foam is you'll see all the hulls are floating to the top. So as it's coming to a boil, I just keep stirring it a little bit. And maybe the cat's in here looking for something, so the video might boil for a second. If you can see that it all comes to the edges, and then just keeping that foam off also helps prevent it from boiling over. So you're gonna watch it for a couple of minutes. When it's coming to a good boil here, and you don't want it at a heavy boil. So when it starts to come to a boil, I put it down. It's at 9 now. I'm just gonna, you want it at, I don't start the timer till it's kind of boiling where I want it, and then I can leave it because I've scooped all the guck off and it's not gonna boil over. I usually end up putting it around an 8, which is a medium high, I would guess. And I'm still seeing, you're gonna still see tons of those hulls coming up to the edge. If you scoop off too much water, you want to be careful that that there's enough to keep the soybeans boiling well. So like I said, you're going to watch it for the first couple of minutes. But when you've got most of this stuff off, and you've got that's a good boil right there. I can leave that going. So now I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. You can do 20 to 30 minutes, it's fine. And you want to just sort of keep an eye on it. I usually just do something in the kitchen while this is boiling, or something close. I'm doing something close. And come check on it every few minutes and scoop up all the guck that's come to the side. Actually, I think I can turn it down to about 7. All right, so I'm going to let that boil about that speed there for about 20 minutes, and then I'll come back. Okay, so this is boiled for about 20 minutes. If you boil it a little longer, that's okay. But you see it kept up that nice boil, and there was still lots of water, and pretty much all of the hulls have come off. So they're all pretty much off. So I remove that. There we go. I'll take that timer off there, and I'll bring it over here. And then what I do is I just let that drain. And I let it drain for maybe 10 minutes or so. I come back, and then I'll show you what I do with it next. There we go. And that was just steaming and draining. Okay, so the soybeans have now kind of cooled off. So I have them here. And what I do is I take a clean dish towel, because you want the soybeans dry before you add anything, before you add the tempeh starter to them. So just to make sure that no germs or anything get into them. And I usually do this at night. This is a nicer time for me, because it only takes 20 minutes to boil them. And then I just kind of leave them overnight in between 2 clean dish towels. And then we'll get to that in the morning, and I'll show you how easy it is after that. The next step. So for me, it's the next morning after the soybeans have dried, but you don't have to leave them overnight. You can just leave them for an hour or 15-20 minutes, but they should be fairly dry. I think maybe it's slightly damp, but you want them to be not necessarily bone dry, but dry. So I just put those in the bowl. It's so easy. Shake that out. I just use a 1/2 to 1 teaspoon of tempeh starter. This is like a 1/2 teaspoon, so I'm just going to make it a heaping. And sprinkle it over the beans, like that. And then we just mix it up, make sure it's well distributed. Just for about 20-30 seconds or so. Looks like it's all in. There's no powder at the bottom or anything. So you get yourself 2 plastic sandwich bags. It's about this size. I like this size. I reuse these bags. These are fresh ones that I'm using. If you use 2.5 cups of soybeans, you'll have about 5 cups soaked. Whoops. 2. So you should end up with about 2.5 cups per bag. There'll be maybe a little bit left. 1. Make sure your hands are clean when you do this. 2, just so you don't introduce random bacteria. So that's 2 I started out with 2.5 cups of dry beans, and I've got about 5 cups plus a little. So put maybe half of that in there and half of that in here. So I just have equal. Then you just close it up. So when I want to reuse these bags, I just rinse them out with water and a little hydrogen peroxide and let them air dry, and then I can just reuse them, and then of course then I don't have to punch holes in them again. So you punch about 12 to 14 holes, about an inch apart-ish. 1, 2, 14. And flip them over and do the other side. Whoops, I did that side. Did I do this side? Yeah. This one looks fatter than the other one. I'm not sure why, but that's all right. Just make sure that there are, Okay, so then you take these bags and put them in an incubator, an oven with the light turned on. You want to keep them around 30, 32 degrees Celsius. I'll show you the setup I have. Here's where I incubate my tempeh. So if you see on the left here, this is it's in this closet. I just set it at 32 degrees and it keeps it, 32 degrees. And since the floor is warm in here, we have a heated floor, it barely has to come on. Starter that I'm making starter, so I don't have to buy it anymore. And these are 2 that are almost finished incubating. So I'm gonna move these over here and put these here. And you can see the difference. Okay, so this one's been incubating about a day. As you can see, it's almost all white. That's pretty much ready, but I might let it go another few hours. And this is the fresh one. Okay, and that's it. I just leave it there and I check it, in the morning, at night. If it looks pretty much like this, I'll take it out, leave it at room temperature for an hour or 2, then refrigerate it, and then you can eat it within a week once it's refrigerated. Or you can put it in the freezer and it lasts for months and months and months and months. And it's great. Before you use it in any recipe, just cut it in quarters and boil or steam it. Boil it for maybe 5 minutes or steam it for, 5-10 minutes. And that's also fine. Some people use their Instant Pot on the less yogurt setting for an incubator, and that can work great as well, apparently. There's a lot of internet information on that. The tempeh starter, with the price of the tempeh starter and the price of the soybeans, like a block of soybean tempeh, about that size, I think maybe a little smaller, but about that size, would cost about $5, $4.99. And even if I buy the soybeans and I buy the tempeh starter, I pay about 85 cents to make a block that size. Making my own tempeh starter, of course, it's going to be even cheaper than that, and I'm going to be starting to grow my own soybeans, so that'll be even cheaper than that.